So for the next couple of weeks, what we'll look at is a very quick Python boot camp to get you up to speed on Python. And from that point forward, we'll get into the textbook and work with that. We talked about how Python has kind of an odd beginning. The name comes from Monty Python's Flying Circus, and this might explain a little more some of the information and the quirky things that Python has going for it.
I bought something from you last week, and I'm very disappointed.
Oh yeah? What's the problem?
Yeah, well, my BlackBerry is not working.
What's about it? Run out of juice?
No, it's completely frozen.
Oh yeah, I can see that. I'll tell you what, let's try it on orange.
That's got a few black spots, you see.
Oh dear, yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah. But how do you get my BlackBerry working?
Well, it could be an application issue. But where do you store that BlackBerry?
It's on my desktop.
Well, you could try using a mouse to drag the BlackBerry to the trash. And after you've done that, you might want to launch the BlackBerry from the desktop.
Well, I've already tried that a few times. I mean, all it did was mess up Windows.
Well, it might be worth waiting a couple of weeks. They got the latest BlackBerries coming in then.
Well, could you give me a date?
Certainly.
Let me put that date in my diary.
Anything else I can help you with?
Yes, I've also got a problem, to be honest, with my Apple.
Oh dear, that is an old Apple, isn't it?
Yeah.
When did you buy that?
Last week.
Last week? Oh, they brought out 2 new Apples since then. What's the problem with it?
Well, I'm trying to put my dongle in it, and it won't fit.
Oh yeah. And how big's your dongle?
Well, I don't know much about these things, but my wife's seen a few dongles in her time. And she says a little bit on the small side.
Well, I'm afraid there's not a lot I can do about that. Tell you what, let me try booting it. No, it's crashed. Anything else I can help you with?
Well, funnily enough, yes, my grandson's birthday soon, you
Oh, yeah.
see. Now, he's already got an Apple and a BlackBerry. I mean, have you got anything else that you might just like?
Well, we're doing a special offer on these. I mean, I can't make head or tail of them, but the kids seem to like them. Xbox. 360.
That's Monty Python's Flying Circus, or part of it, so that explains some of the odd things that go along with Python, because the writer of Python was a great Monty Python fan. We'll see some more of these in the future. All right, let's look at some Python basics. First of all, and we kind of covered this last week, Python's an interpreted language, and there are 2 different modes that work with Python. One is the interactive mode, and more than likely we'll refer to that in the future as the prompt or the command line mode. Now, if you talk to Ken Dewey, he'll tell you that most of the time, if you're going into cybersecurity, you're going to use the command line, the prompt mode, the interactive mode over the script mode that we look at here. But there are times that you're going to have to use the script. So I want you to become familiar and comfortable with this command line mode. And we'll take a look at that in a little more detail today. The script mode is what we'll start covering the second week in February, and we can actually write programs and scripts in Python, and we'll see how beneficial they can be and how useful they can be for us. So we're going to start with the command line mode, Again, that's used in cyber, and we'll go through a quick reference there. When we talk about errors, and this will come up in everything that we do, including the command line mode, there are three types of errors that we can look at. One is a syntax error. And a syntax error means that you typed in a command word inappropriately. And what we look at there, it could be that you misspelled that command word, or that in the case of most statements, those command words are lowercase, you made the word uppercase. And the Python interpreter will reject that. One of the most common is print. Print in Python, the command print, is all lowercase. People will accidentally make it uppercase, and then the program will error out. So that's an example of a syntax error. A runtime error is when you've got it coded properly, there's no syntax error, but there's something within the program that makes it error out. Some function that you've used that won't allow the program to operate correctly. And then a semantic error is an error where you've done the syntax correctly, you've got the runtime correctly, but the program as you wrote it will not accomplish the task that you wanted to do. Unfortunately, we see that a lot of times on the midterm and the final, but we'll try and keep you out of that. So, this is going to be audience play along, so I'd like you to bring up the command line. Remember, go to the Start button, type in CMD in the search window. It'll give you an option to bring up the command line, and you should see something very similar to what we have on the screen.
Where do you go and type that in there?
Start button, where it says search at the bottom, type in CMD. All right, from there, before we bring up Python, your command line window may have text that's really small or hard to see. One of the ways to fix that is to go up in the title bar and right-click, and it'll bring up a menu that has options. Font is the one that we want to look at, layout and colors. By default, it's going to say raster font. You can select Lucinda, which is probably the best one, and then change the size to suit your style. I like to make mine a little bit larger. So get that set up. As we go through these exercises, I'm not going to stop. If you have problems, try and keep up. Go back and rework it after we get done, or after class sometime. If you're really running into a lot of problems, see me after class and I'll go over with the information with you individually. First thing we'll start off with is variables. And there are three different types of variables that we can have in Python: integers, strings, and float. Now, with the strings, and we'll look at this in more detail, we can indicate a string either by single or double quote marks. And we'll work with that a little bit later. An integer is a whole number. A float has decimal places after that number. There are times, even when we have a whole number like 10, we want to create it as a float. So we'll do 10 decimal 0. And that automatically tells Python that number will be a float and will be associated with other float numbers, other numbers that have decimals. The neat thing about Python is that I don't have to specially declare a string. For an example, if I have a variable equal, let's say, a sentence, it knows right away that that's a string. If I have a variable equal an integer, Python knows right away that variable is going to be an integer and will always be an integer, and that can get us into trouble. And then the same with float. Now there are commands that we can change that, and we'll look at that towards the end of the lecture. But by and large, when you create a variable, Python already knows what it is, and it knows how to handle it. That's a little different than C# and C++. If you're not sure what a variable is or how you should classify it, you can type in the command type single quotation mark, in this case a single quote mark, hello world, single quote mark in quotations. Try that and see what happens. You should be at the Python prompt, which is 3 greater than signs. And what did you get?
Class string.
Class string, exactly. So if you're not sure what a string is and you type this information in, Python will tell you what it is. Now with strings, that's pretty easy to see. But when we look at different number values, go ahead and type in an integer and see how it responds, and then type in a decimal and see how it responds. Are you all hearing that music?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you were talking about.
So you may think it may be obvious, and yes, when we type a string in or an integer or a decimal, it is. But let's say that you have a variable in your program, and you don't know what type of integer, decimal, string that variable is. You can type the variable in, and it will tell you whether it's a string, a decimal, or an integer. So that's kind of a good thing to have. When we create variables, that's known in the Python terminology as an assignment statement. We're actually assigning a value to a variable. And so then a variable obviously refers to the value that we've assigned to it. So as an example, if you look partway down on the slide that's on the screen, message equals, and now for something completely different. One of the common lines often heard in Monty Python. By the way, if we were entering this on the command line, we wouldn't have word wrap, so it would go all the way across the screen for us. Go ahead and enter the message equals, and now for something completely different. And notice in this case I've used double quote marks. Our single quote and double quote are interchangeable. But I'll show you why in just a couple of slides. It's better to get in the habit of using double quote marks. While you're at it, go ahead and type in pi equals 3.14159. And then use your type command on message and pi and see what responses you get. Okay, so you can see where if you have that variable and you don't know the value, the type command can be... if you don't have that, know what that variable is, the type command can be very useful in helping you figure out whether you have a string or a numeric value. So, one of the tools that we have in Python that makes our job a little bit easier. Some illegal variable names that you will run into or you may try and create and won't work, and here's why. 76 trombones. In Python, you are not allowed to start a variable with anything but a character. So an alpha character, A through Z. So you can't have a variable that starts with a number. Also, you cannot have a variable like the second example, more with an @ sign, or more with a copyright sign, or more with a number sign. That's disallowed in Python also. And then the last one, class equals Mazda RX-7. You might say, what's wrong with that? It doesn't have a number in it. It doesn't have a special character with it. The problem with class is that this is a Python reserved word. And so you cannot use a reserved word as a variable.